Other researchers came up with another kind of intelligence that they found important. Well, they're wondering why there seems to be a mystery of why people who are very smart, intelligent, still have kind of interpersonal problems. For example, their marriage might fail, they're not as likely to have as many friends, or just as well liked. And they kind of maybe assume that there might be a different kind of intelligence at play when it comes to interpersonal interaction. And so they developed this idea called emotional intelligence. And you might have thought of, ran into this yourself. There's a series of popular pop psychology book on this topic on how to develop emotional intelligence. Now, basically what emotional intelligence is how well you understand, perceive, and replicate emotions. So they broke it down to 4 different components. The first one is your ability to perceive emotions. Basically, are you good at recognizing them in faces, music, and stories? So when you are talking to someone, are you quick to pick up that they're maybe depressed or distressed or sad or happy or angry? Similarly, in works of fiction and music, are you able to pick up these emotional cues right away? Part 2 is to understand the emotions. Specifically, once you've spotted them, are you able to predict them and how they change? So when you're interacting with someone, are you able to kind of anticipate what the behaviors related to that emotion is? If you can know that if you figure out someone is sad, what are the kind of behaviors and actions related to being sad? Right? So how could you anticipate and predict them? And how could you change your own kind of behavior to elicit that kind of emotion? So if you're trying to cheer someone up, can you really have the wherewithal and the understanding to make someone who's sad, someone happy? Now the third part of this is how to manage your emotions. So basically whether you are good at expressing your own emotions. So some people are very good at, for example, changing their facial features to express a certain emotion. When in the emotion chapter, we looked at Paul Ekman's kind of emotion faces, like scared or happy, and they're really exaggerated. And so one way that we are smart in terms of our emotions is how to kind of manage emotions. If we have a certain emotion, can we kind of control it in our face, conceal it? So imagine you're to be an actor. Some of the most trained actors are also people who are really trained in controlling their facial emotions, right? Because they have to kind of express emotions really on the fly. They have to kind of control their facial expressions, so they have to make sure that they suppress certain kinds of facial expressions, and they can express them when it's needed. Right? So that's the kind of manage emotions. Another example of managing emotions is whether you have very good levels of self-control. So it's not just in the facial features, but whether you control your own emotions. When you look at children, sometimes they're so excited they could just be physically cannot control themselves, and they'll just like jump around like they had a lot of coffee, ice cream, and sugar all at once. Right? So they'll be bouncing off walls. So that's an emotion like happiness or excitement that they can't physically control. Similarly, they can't control like grief or anger or sadness, right? So they'll like just cry freely, or they'll just start shaking. And these are people, as children, they don't have the skills, they haven't developed the skills to control their emotions yet. So imagine someone who has low levels of managing their emotions, and when they feel angry, they'll act really angry, and they can't have low levels of self-control. Okay? And finally, the fourth skill is using your emotions for adaptive or creative thinking. So these are a group of people who are able to use their emotions to solve problems. Basically, they're able to adapt to the situation. As the situation and the people in the situation change, can they change and manage their emotions to get the best outcome? So these are people who are able to use the emotions for problem solving and social solving situations. And so when they did research in emotional intelligence, they found that there's a lot of kind of positive outcomes that are related to people who are high on emotional intelligence. For example, they actually have more friends, they're more likable, they find it easier to interact with people at work, they find it easier to communicate their feelings with other people. Some research has found that they actually have better health outcomes and actually live longer too. And so it seems like there's 2 different kinds of intelligence here, whereas there's intellectual intelligence, thoughtful, stuff like that. And there's also emotional intelligence. And I think the basic, a good example of the dichotomy between the two is that something like intellectual intelligence help you get the job that you want. It makes you look good on paper, you pass the SAT scores or get through the colleges and the classes and get the grades you want. However, once you get into those jobs, a good amount of emotional intelligence is needed to kind of work with interpersonal problems, how to work with your coworkers, deal with your boss, work under stress, to conceal your own emotions. If you disagree with a certain policy, can you act in a way that would make it look like you're upset that policy? And so there's a lot that seems to go, that makes emotional intelligence separate. There's also seems to be part of the brain that controls the kind of emotional intelligence. In that, there's people with, for example, certain kinds of brain damage that find it very difficult to manage their emotions. For example, we talked continuously a lot about the case of Phineas Gage, who had issues with their prefrontal cortex lobe, and once that part of the brain was destroyed, he became easily irritated and can't really control his anger. He was kind of open to emotional fits and anger fits all the time. Okay.